Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. See, there's a few more people coming in. There's plenty of seats. There's more seats over here on this side as well. And some seats down front if you want to sit right in front like the good students. Welcome. My name is Lindsay Callahan, and I am the 55th president of the Junior League of Fresno. I always enjoy saying that I'm the 55th president, not just because 55 has a nice ring to it, but just to really show how long Junior League has been in the Fresno area doing amazing things for our community. It's been actually longer than 55 years. It's been since 1948 when 30 community-inspired women came together and started the Service League, which then became the Junior League of Fresno. We've left an indelible mark on the Fresno community, from the Ronald McDonald House to our work directly with the Marjorie Mason Center to the work that we've done with Break the Barriers, the Bloodmobile, starting the Discovery Center, and now we've really contributed to making the Central Valley a better place. Today, we're here because we're on the cusp of something really great. We have this opportunity that we call community impact. This is an opportunity for us to focus our Junior League investment, our time, our talent, and our treasure on something that will make a big difference in our community. That's what this conversation is about tonight, is to talk about what the biggest needs are in our community to help us decide where we want to focus and contribute back to our community. We don't know what that area is. No one's decided where we're going to focus yet. We really do want to have conversations with you as our members and you as community members to help us decide where we should focus our time. What we're really looking for is this sweet spot, right? We're looking for this place where there's a huge need or a huge opportunity, as well as alignment with our focus area of children and women in the Central Valley, as well as a place where we can contribute back. And we really want to be in a place where there are also other partners that we can work with. So government agencies, nonprofits, businesses, where we can collaborate and really maximize the amount of effort that we're putting into the specific issue. We're fundamentally committed to making Fresno a better place. We're taking the time to have these conversations because we really want to be thoughtful about where we put our investment, and we're taking the time to have these conversations because we're going to continue to invest in the Fresno area for many, many more years, and someday there'll be the 155th president of the Junior League of Fresno, and she will be talking about all the great things that we did. So with that, with no further ado, we are lucky because we're not on this mission alone. Tonight, our distinguished panel of speakers will share about their perspective about the need in the Fresno community. And better yet, they're going to talk a little bit about some opportunities to close some of the gaps and some opportunities to partner on some initiatives that could really make Fresno a better place, a more prosperous community. I'm so appreciative to have their experience and wisdom as we investigate our opportunity for big, long-lasting change in our community. Please welcome with me our panelists. At the very end, we have Barbara Foster, who is the director of the Specialized Foster Parent Training Project at Fresno State. I thought my job had a really long title. She has decades of experience in social work and is a renowned foster care expert and advocate. And as we asked around who we should talk to about foster care and foster youth and out-of-home care, her name came up again and again and again, and we said we have to have her, and we got her. Thank you for joining us, Barbara. You're welcome. Next, we have Larry Powell. Larry is the retired superintendent for Fresno County Schools. He is a leader in the education community, not just here in Fresno, but also statewide. He's a tireless advocate for education and children. And in his retirement, so-called retirement, he continues to lend his wisdom and his expertise to local organizations, including his role as a trustee to Fresno Pacific. We're very honored to have Larry here tonight. Next, we have Ms. Kendra Rogers, who's the Director of Community Investment at Granville Homes. Prior to joining Granville Home, she was the executive director of First 5 Fresno County. She is a renowned expert and advocate for early childhood learning and early childhood care. If you want to know anything about brain development and how important it is for 0 to 5, listen up, because Kendra knows it all, and she's an amazing advocate. Thank you, Kendra. Next, we have Gnia, who is the Vice President of Community Impact. I love the word community impact. We're all joining in on that, right? At the United Way of Fresno County. May has a special role at United Way of raising additional funds and getting more contributions for other local community organizations. She's a passionate advocate for local communities and will provide us some insight into her perspective. Thank you, May. And last but not least, we have Linda Penner, who is currently Governor Jerry Brown's appointee to serve as the chair of the Board of State and Community Corrections, right? A leader in public safety and corrections, her previous role locally as Fresno County Chief Probation Officer focused on systems change and evidence-based practice to address public safety issues. Thank you, Linda. So, to get us going, and I think we're going to start down there with you, Barbara. So each of our panelists is going to take a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, to talk with you about what they see as the greatest needs impacting women and children in our community. Barbara.
Can you hear me? I think that, as you can tell from the panel, education, health, mental health, social services, as well as criminal justice are all aspects that are critically important to children and families in our community. For my particular perspective, looking at how we fare in the Valley, in all of those areas, there are a number of indicators that you can check with Children's Defense Fund, Children's Now, and see that we don't always fare too well in the Valley, and in particular in Fresno. I can do that. All right. And so I think that those elements are magnified tenfold when you factor in abuse, neglect, and issues that come up in foster care. How do we provide for those that are the most vulnerable in our community? You can look at the issue of poverty, for example, and Fresno County has 30.6% of all families in our county are under or below the poverty level. You look at poverty levels for Hispanic and African Americans that are 3 and 4 times greater than that. And you look at the child welfare data, and 83% of the children that we have in care at this time, about 2,000, are from minority families. So how do we support those families? What is it that we can do in all of our systems combined that will reduce the number of contacts of significant abuse that children experience during the course of their early lifetimes that leaves long-lasting impact for them? And as a society and a community, we, of course, respond to those issues later on in their lives as well. With that, I think that there have been several significant issues. You can look at the graduation rates, for example, for foster youth, and they are significantly below the general population. You can look at the severity of mental health for children exiting the foster care system. Again, you will find that those are significantly higher and more disadvantaged than the general population. You look at their capacity to earn a decent living wage. It's reduced as well. In all of those areas, foster youth do not fare well. what is it that we can do? Some of the systems, we have had legislation. Back in 2003, I believe, AB 490 was passed. Significantly changed how we worked with education, for example. As recently as 2011, there was a class action suit that provided the foundation for interactions between behavioral health or mental health facilities and departments within counties and the child welfare system. With those improvements coming up, we have been able to change how we deliver services. We're currently involved in a couple of other arenas with the California Partners for Permanency that looks at well-being factors as well. And how do we partner? As your president indicated, partnership is something that if we don't put into place and nurture and build the foundation for, instead of functioning inside of our silos that are currently restrictive in many instances, we won't be able to change the data that happens 10, 15 years from now. So with that, hopefully, we'll have some integrated plans to address education, child welfare, mental health, criminal justice as well.
Yeah, good. Young boy was lost in a grocery store, and a clerk picked him up, put him on his shoulders, took him around and said, "Do you see your mom?" Kid says no. Took him around a little further, says, "Do you see your mom now?" Says no. Finally, the clerk got a little bit upset and with kind of a harsh voice said, "Do you see your mom now?" And he said, "No, I just keep seeing my dad." Now, the reason I say that, twofold. You have to learn to ask the right question, okay? And second is, where are the dads? You see, for me in education, 43 years in education, I'll tell you the big deficit I have seen, and it has grown every year, is the lack of fathers taking responsibility in the home. When you take a look at all of the statistics on dropouts, on prisoners, on anything that has a negative connotation at all, you take a look and fathers were absent. They weren't there to help mothers who struggle with something they did not want to inherit, which is being both parents. And it's a very, very tough thing. And we've seen so many kids whose misbehavior could easily have been managed had a father been in the home. And when I take a look at the fatherlessness that we face in our society, but in particular here in Fresno, we're looking at huge numbers. 55% to 70%, depending on which statistic you want to believe, of prisoners had no father in the home. 55 to 70%. 80% of rapists had no father in their home. When you start taking a look at all of the things that make for a society to be balanced, you need that kind of influence. Now, what I suggest is this: you don't necessarily have to be the father in the home to be a father. You have to be an adult who cares about kids and are willing to put in some time. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But somebody else can be there. A male needs to be there in the home to help the child understand all of the roles that are necessary. We have so many boys that have been lost because they don't have a male role model. And that is not a negative toward women, because it has been such an unfair obligation that has been pressed upon them. Absolutely unfair. But if I take a look at every statistic that is negative, where there are no fathers, you have every kind of dysfunction you can possibly imagine. The other thing is literacy. You know, there's a crossover in those who are in prison without a father and also can't read. 45% of those in prison cannot read at a third grade level or better. 45%. That's insane. When you think about how many of our kids end up going into prison, they didn't have influence of a father, they didn't have literacy, and when you don't have literacy, you often lose hope. And as a result, we end up with kids who have no direction, they have no sense of support in the family, they have no sense of there's a point past which I cannot go, that I have to learn boundaries are actually good. And what happens when a child can control a family, the child is in control in their mind, but what happens in life is they don't make good decisions later. We learn from being told, no, you can't do that, and done in a loving way, but in a responsible way. So when you don't have literacy, we have a really big problem, because we have 25% of our families in America did not buy one book last year. 33% of our families did not read a book last year. When you think about this, how do you learn to read? By being read to. You see, when moms and dads read to their kids and take the opportunity to give some dramatic emphasis to it and to encourage them, to make it exciting, and the words on a page come to life, it changes that child's view of themselves. I had a 7th grader once say to me, "Mr. Powell, when do I get my check?" I said, "What are you talking about?" Well, she said, "My mother gets a check. When do I get mine?" Do you realize if you're thinking in 7th grade that your biggest expectation in life and hope is that somebody's going to give you a check for doing nothing, you are hopeless in a very, very serious way, and you have no place to go. And what we've got to do is understand a couple of things. Work gives worth. I feel better about myself when I'm doing something, and I feel really great about myself when I'm doing something for somebody else. You see, we have to give our kids those kinds of opportunities. That means in the family, you have to have those times when mom and dad say to the kids, "Here's what I want you to do. This is your obligation, and I'm going to give you opportunities to do it." But you have to do it. We had a section in the house where it was totally, our daughter Katie had complete control over. We had other areas she had no control over, so she learned boundaries. And it's amazing the good decision maker she grew up to be because of those kinds of things. But it takes mom and dad in the home working like crazy in today's society when you have a 4-minute attention span. The digital natives own the world right now, and that has created some incredible problems for all of you who are digital immigrants and digital dinosaurs. It's a tough, tough time. So we have to learn, if you don't use smartphone and smart technology, you need to communicate with your kids, because that's how they communicate. And you need to be in their lives in that way. So there's some things we're going to be talking about tonight, but literacy, so critical, and dads in the home. Making sure if they don't have a dad in the home, get a male role model, can step in and help out and be a part of that family. We're doing a lot with mentoring, and I'll share more of that in a little bit. Thank you.
Pass that down. Great. Well, great. I get to build on the last two. And so for me, I think as a whole, certainly poverty, is a big issue in our community. As Barbara alluded, 1 in 3 of our children is born into poverty. And so for women and children, I think that overarching issue gets back to education. And there's so much of the work that we all do that is predicted by mom's educational level. And so, recently one of the studies that I'd come across that's been working out is the birth cohort study that's looking at looked at an entire birth cohort for the state of California. And the strongest predictor by a landslide for determining whether a child was going to be involved with child welfare was mom not having a high school diploma. So when you think about all the things we do around child abuse prevention, but yet we know that if we wrap those moms to make sure that they are graduating and continuing on, that we can prevent it, way upstream. And so, when you think about the health issues facing women, we know when the data is spliced that those with higher education levels tend to fare better in terms of health outcomes. More likely to have insurance, more likely to be using preventative care. The same with breastfeeding. We know that giving babies the best start in life through breastfeeding, all of those things are driven by and tie back to several predictors, but mom's education level always being one of them. And so when we think about here in our community, as you mentioned, 3rd grade level reading, 65% of the children in Fresno County are not reading on grade level in 3rd grade. They are not proficient in 3rd grade. 65%. That's a lot of kids. And then when we go upstream even a little bit further, we now have a universal kindergarten readiness measure in this community. Only 37% of our kids countywide showed up ready to go. And so when we think about the fact that kids that start behind stay behind, and we look at the issues facing women in particular, when we talked about fatherlessness, the issue of childcare comes up. Well, we know research has shown without a doubt, and Larry can back this because he got behind it as superintendent, that quality childcare and quality preschool matter for kids. And yet when you look at the cost issues for, particularly single moms, right? So you're making the decision between I want to work, but I'm only going to make enough to pay for my child to be in childcare, so I have nothing else left. You have working families that are middle income that are saying we can't afford high quality childcare. So you have many women and many husband and wives facing that decision of, well, what do we do? Does one of us not work? Do we put them in care? How do we make ends meet? So the reality of all of these things, you look at the issue of domestic violence, and we know that that is a huge issue for women across socioeconomic groups, and particularly those women that lack an education have fewer options in terms of being able to really get out of those abusive relationships. So I think for me, it really comes down to this issue of we know what we need to do to get our kids to graduate. We know what they need for a solid foundation, and it starts at birth. It starts before birth. And in fact, I was at a meeting today around preterm birth, and it was announced that there's going to be a very, very large investment coming into this community because our rates are the same as some of the communities they're working in Africa. So the reality is huge here in this community about what our babies are up against, what our women are up against, and knowing that 80% of brain development occurs before age 3, and we think of those toxic environments when all that kind of stress is happening on us, as you know, we look at high numbers of single female-headed households. We have a lot going against us, but if we can wrap our women and our girls and get them through that finish line and on further in their careers or education, we can really start to move the needle on these things. But it begins before birth.
Okay, let me see. Is it working? Hello?
There's a little bit up on the line.
Here, try mine. It's on there. Okay, we'll try that again. There it is. So I get to be the most luckiest person in this community because I get to witness a lot of the work that Barbara and Larry and Kendra, that they all do. And working at the United Way, we love this word of community impact. So as we look at all the different things that's going on in the community, we're always looking at where are the gaps? Where are the gaps? Where can we fill in? And what can the community fill in? So we're constantly looking at those. And all of the things that they have mentioned is so important. And to the women, to the children of this community, it's definitely probably some of the most important issues that we're going to ever address here in our community. But as I look at women and children and continue to look at where are some of the gaps that we're missing, the things that we need to fill in, I see that for the most part, we definitely need to educate our girl child. Not to say that the boy child is not important, but across our country, across our nation, we know that mothers have sometimes in most households, are the sole responsibility of raising these children. And like Kendra said, if we educate the girl child, if we educate the women, the young women, the single mothers, and get them to the next stage, I'm not quoting any other business here, but we know that the children will be better. Because if the parent's better, if the mother is better, statistics shows that the child will be better. And then when we're looking at children, in poverty, one of the things that I see all the time when I'm out and about in the community is I see that there's a lot of need around the issues of books, the issues of extracurricular activities. So simple things to some of us that we take for granted. Just being able to pay the fee to play soccer, being able to pay the fee to play that instrument in school. Music, art supplies, all of those things are so important to our children. And yet so many of our kids don't have access to those simple things that a lot of us may take for granted. My story is not very different from a lot of us here in the audience probably. I grew up in West Fresno, so I'm not foreign to poverty. I know exactly what that means, and I've seen it, I've lived it. My mother raised 9 of us as a single mom. Coming to America, my mom was a widow, so she brought 9 of us here, and miraculously, we all survived. But you know, unfortunately, not all of us made it to graduation. Not all of us made it to high school graduation. And for those of us that did, the access to resource, the access to books, the access to teachers that cared was so important in that turning point, that tipping point that helped those of us that did graduate high school. So when I'm looking around and I'm working in the community and I'm thinking, what can we do? What can we do? Books are so important. Extracurricular is so important. And at the same time, sometimes a lot of our children just need that one person that says, hey, let me help you, let me mentor you, let me just be that friend of yours, someone to help you. And so at the United Way, when we look around programs and we look at those gaps that we need to fill, we tend to do things that are kind of out of the ordinary. For example, we have an annual event that we'd love for more people to get around with, and that's we call it Operation Fresno Shape Up. So we're trying to teach low-income kids healthy choices, healthy eating, simple exercises, getting them out to where they may not be able to, but if we don't get them out, they're going to go somewhere else. So that positive influence. So women and children, definitely when I'm looking around, I want to look at extracurricular education is so important, but also some way find a way to fill some of those gaps. Thanks.
I tried to manipulate to get this spot as a speaker in the other room. I felt it was pretty important for me not to be the lead-off because I believe in my world, in my career, I'm the catcher. I'm the catcher you don't want. I am the criminal justice system. I'm here representing the criminal justice system. I am a repository of failures, of systems that aren't communicating with each other, of systems that are unaware that I'm working with Family A over here in the Department of Children and Family Services. The County Office of Education is schooling those kids. First Five may be making sure mom's nursing her new babies, and United Way is trying to get them some funding, but nobody knows about each other. I am the repository of a system that for very long operated in very, very restricted silos. And that's not because those of us in the game, and I can tell you I know everybody on the panel, and I've had the pleasure of working and interacting with them. It's not because that's how we thought it should be. It was because the system's built and budgeted so very often only to be able to barely sustain what you do, and you believe strongly what you do is really important. In the probation department, when I was there, and I spent a short 37 years there before I retired and decided to go to a really crazy job, we had children who were in foster care. We had young people that the court had taken away and put them in placement, and we became their parents. The system became the people that moved them. We learned through those efforts that that wasn't the best outcome for kids, to put them in group homes. That we learned quickly that what they needed was relative care, they needed good foster placements, that when we put them in mini institutions and hoped that those worked well, we weren't doing a great job. We worked with women who were victims of domestic violence. We have caseloads that are enormous, of case after case after case of families that are dysfunctional, that have these ravaging fights and upheavals, and on a Saturday night and end up back together during the week, and we need to figure out how to untangle that. The system has much to do. We manage young teeny kids that are going through the court process, that are victims of sexual assault, that are victims of molestations in their own homes, and we gather them and we move them through a court system, and we send dad off to prison, and we forget to support the family that's left behind. These are all independent, incredible efforts that are made by organizations that have the best of this community in mind and want things to work. But we're going to have to remember that we need to blend. We need to work at this as a large unit. It has to be something that is managed in terms of looking at a family, that is taking a systemic look at the issues there. Many families today, and I've traveled a lot across the state with the governor in small groups of 6 and 7, have talked to the criminal justice professionals in that community, and I hear the same thing at those tables with the DA, the sheriff, the public defender, the presiding judge, the police chief, the health and human services director. They talk about the very same issues that we're raising here today. They're talking about mental health issues that are unaddressed, that finally find their way to the criminal justice system. They're talking about substance abuse issues that are ongoing and have unmet needs. They're talking about gang issues that plague communities and that need to be addressed. I'm reminded of my movie that I love so dearly with Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton, It's Complicated. And I must say that 4 or 5 times a week. It is not just one fix. It is not that you need to give the criminal justice more money, because frankly, as a person who's been in that system now going on 40 years, I can tell you, if you want to invest in this community, invest in the little people. Invest in those families that are struggling to learn how to parent, to learn how to feed their children, to learn that reading to their children makes an enormous difference. It is a minuscule investment compared to the one you're going to make at my end of the system. We're super expensive in our prison system. Just.
Wow. Thank you all. My head's kind of clicking and swimming and spinning a little bit. So I want to step back for a minute. So we've talked about what the needs are, and I think that what the overall message is that there's a lot of need, but we also have to take the context of the need into consideration, and that it's about trying to get in front of the need as opposed to dealing with the need at the back end. It's about prevention. It's about dealing with a child within the context of a family within the context of a community, and as Linda said, there's probably not one solution. So having said that, are there some solutions? What I'm going to ask the panel is whether or not there's some promising programs or strategies or solutions that are starting to get at closing the gap and addressing the needs that you all kind of collectively identified. And Kendra's ready.
I will. Well, one of the things that I didn't mention, but it's perfect entree into here, is that we're seeing more folks, and my boss, Darius Assemi, who's the CEO of Granville, being one of them, galvanizing around teen pregnancy prevention. So we have double the state average here in Fresno County, and we know, again, because of our, it's a tough topic to talk about, it's uncomfortable, no one wants to go there. Politically, it's a very, very big hot potato. But the reality is, we know that those babies are at greatest risk. We know that those moms, I'm sure many of you saw the news last week of the 3 babies that are in critical condition, and 19-year-old mother facing possibly felony charges, and we think about, of course, I can only go to, we failed that mom. We failed those 3 little babies, that if we have a 19-year-old with 3 babies, we have issues in this community. So I think there's a lot of folks coming together now to have this conversation about how do we move towards having more comprehensive sex ed in this community. In addition to the teen pregnancy piece, our gonorrhea and chlamydia rates are now one of the top in the state, to where the CDC is now paying attention and coming to Fresno saying what is going on there. So I think while it's an issue, it's an opportunity to, what was it that you said in there? About opportunities, crisis creates opportunity, what was that saying? Right, okay, so we have this opportunity, and I think you have more people that are coming out saying we need to talk about this, we need to do something about this, because our failure to do so is creating severe consequences for us as a community. As you said, that's an expensive, forget the human cost, that's in itself huge, but the cost, the fiscal cost associated with that. So that's one of the things I'm really excited to see that's bubbling up, is this, more people coming out around the conversation of what do we do to get on top of this teen pregnancy issue in our community.
And is there some work that's already been done on that? Is there some work that's already been done on that? Or are there some programs that are already in existence that are promising in teen pregnancy?
Yes, there is. Fresno Barrios Unidos is who I know they have someone here tonight. They are the only organization in the community doing the Teen Success Program, which is focusing on those teen moms, keeping them in school. They have to commit to not having a repeat pregnancy. All of these things. There's some great efforts happening with Barrios. They're doing advocacy work within the school system. The Fresno Regional Foundation also has funding from the Flora Hewlett Packard, or not Packard, there we go, William and Flora Hewlett Foundation to support teen pregnancy prevention. So they have a coalition of grantees. The County Office of Ed has a really strong program, as well as EOC is doing some things through their Adolescent Family Life program. So there's definitely some efforts, but clearly, given that we're still double the state average, it hasn't been enough. So several of us are stepping up to kind of rally around those that are doing the work and been in the trenches to say we need to have the policy conversations. Because as you said, this isn't about just more services. This is about those policy issues that create the conditions which require the need for the services. So that's one area that I'm seeing that I have not seen attention to in the past.
Thank you, Kendra. I think Larry's.
We need a lot fewer ain't it awfuls out there. And I think you know what I mean. Because a lot of us sit very comfortably where we are and we go, ain't it awful? And what we need are a lot more people who are willing to put their time, talent, and treasure to work. And mostly your time. I'll tell you what, we've thrown a lot of money over the years at education, at prisons, at a whole lot of things, and we've gotten very little in return. If you look at the statistics, the chart almost goes down the more money that comes in. And I don't know exactly why, but that's what happens. What we need are people who are willing to say, I'll give you an hour working with a kid that has no direction to help them understand one simple concept. How did each of you get to be successful? You had a strategy. You see, our kids today are growing up without strategy. They're just letting life happen to them. And whatever happens, that's the way it is. Well, I'll tell you what, that is a prescription for an amazing amount of failures. You see, our kids have to understand, if I will postpone a few things that I really want for just a little bit of time, I get 40, 50 years of a good life. See, but our kids are instant. I want it now, and in fact, if I could get it, I want it yesterday. See, that's where they're growing up. And we have to let them know that deferring gratification is actually a good thing. When I wait 4 years to get my high school diploma, or I wait 4 years to get my college diploma, when I do those kinds of things, I'm guaranteeing myself a much better chance in life. In fact, the literacy thing which I talked about is this. If you become literate, you double your income in a lifetime just by becoming literate. If you want to really go higher, you simply continue to add education to your life. You know, and get your master's and go on and get your doctorate. Go ahead and get those certificates in other areas. You see, but we've done something that's a little bit disingenuous. We've said kids that go to college are the only ones who are successful. That's been a major dysfunction on the part of educators and a whole lot of other people in our society. You see, college readiness is good, but so is career readiness. And I'll give you a good example. I had a young man come and fix my refrigerator. It took him 3 minutes. And I said, how much for the part? And he said, $3 for the part and $97 for knowing where to put it. You know what? He's making a good life. He's going to be a productive citizen. He's going to be a taxpayer, not just a tax user. He's going to be able to read those silly things that come to us during balloting time so we can understand the issues. We want people who are capable out there making decisions and voting for folks. Because here's what happens. De Tocqueville said a long time ago, when those in democracy understand that they can vote themselves a raise, democracy is over. You know what I mean by that? What he meant? When I can get elected officials who will vote something back to me, I no longer have to work. And see, that is a prescription for a loss of democracy. Democracy requires each of us to put in effort to be a contributing member of society, not just a receptor. Now, there are always those who have special circumstances and need extra help. And we need to do things to help them. But we need a hand up, not a handout. And that handout mentality has created a whole lot of 7th graders who ask, when do I get my check? You see, we have to change that. So one of the things we've been doing a lot, Alan Autry, former mayor, has put together a mentoring program for kids that are in juvenile hall. And he's gotten together 20 to 40 adult males to go in an hour a week and talk to those kids about how they got to be successful, sharing strategy with them. Now here's what happens, and Linda, you can verify this. Those kids will do this. I don't believe you. And so I'm going to do everything in your face because you say you're committed to seeing me, to being with me. They're going to do everything they can to try to drive you away because that's their experience, is that adults abandon them. So if you want to become a mentor, you have to be so single-minded that you will not let anything they say or do dissuade you from being a mentor. You come back the next week when they've said something stupid to you, they've used a 4-letter word, they pretend they're not listening, all of those things. You come back the next week and you talk to them with the same level of enthusiasm that you did the week before. You see, because they don't believe adults. Their history has proven that they don't work. So we've got to do some things with your time and your friend's time. And think about this, what happens. If you will invest an hour a week with a kid, you will change their destination in life. We have seen it over and over and over again, and it doesn't cost you more than an hour. I want to compliment several businesses who give release time to go and mentor. You see, they pay their folks to go and mentor. And it would be nice if you didn't have to do that, but just getting a mentor there makes all the difference in the world to a young kid who is making terrible decisions, and now they got somebody that's going to stick with them, care about them, and encourage them. I'll share one quick story with you. My wife has mentored 9 Hmong girls since 2002. She was principal at Ewing Elementary School. She started working with 9 girls coming from poor families, literally dirt floors, those kinds of things. They all are in college or college graduates now. She met with them once a week on a regular basis. They called it the Sunday Van Club. We got the van. She went and took an hour and a half to go pick them up. She took them to plays, to all kinds of experiences for them to do something we call anticipatory socialization, helping you see what you can become. When we do that with the kids, we change their life, but we not only change their life, we change their family's life as well, and all of their kids' lives as well. And all you got to do is put an hour a week in, and you can make a huge difference.
Thank you. Next, Linda?
I'll chime in because I have absolutely no manners.
Which is why we invited you.
I cannot support what Larry's saying loud enough or long enough. I can tell you that all of you, or many of you out in this audience, are parents. And you're all spending a lot of time giving your kids a vision of what's out there or what could be. From the way you put pictures up in your house, to the fruit in your refrigerator, to the salad you eat, and you take that for granted. But you put that together, you're educating your young person repeatedly by those actions and reactions. And when I was out looking at group homes at a period of time, I can tell you that I would go in and say, well, what are you doing? There's no pictures up on the wall. There's no silverware on the table when it's dinner time. There's no fruit here for them to eat. No one was giving them that much of a vision on how it can be different. Now, that's by the time they get to the criminal justice system. So in a perfect world, the investments happen in those people's homes where you're educating mom and you're moving the agenda. First Five had that infant child maternal parent program that, you know, where you were actually in there and not taking for granted that mom knows how to do the deal. Because if you were never given a vision of that, you don't know how to do it. Y'all remember the first time they handed you the baby? Not, I mean, male or female. I can remember my husband and I, we're pretty capable people. We looked at them, well, what do we do with this thing? Hope we don't break it. And then they told me, you know, my son had an ear infection. I go, well, give it back. We can't do this. Picture you without the kind of support you had in your life, where you knew how to feed the baby, and you didn't just feed the baby to shut the baby up so the baby learned how to eat 24/7 and didn't get any interaction. It's really very, very simple learning curve, but it's getting to the base of that that's the complex part. It truly is, because we only find those people when things have fallen apart. And so we need to figure out a way to do that outreach.
Both Larry and Linda make me think really what our job is to instill hope. How do we do that in a community when, like Larry says, you hear all the negatives over and over again? Where are those pluses that happen? And they occur all the time. And it's not the institutions that will make the change. It's the individuals. It's the families that we work with in conjunction with what they can share. How we learn to be who we are today happen because of our families, because of the people who believed that they saw something, a little spark in each of us, and nurtured that, helped it grow, helped it ignite and catch fire. That led them then, or me in particular, to believe that, oh, I could do this. That's possible. That's an alternative. But if nobody shows you, nobody instills in you, nobody believes in you, then it's not likely you're going to just ask, when's my check going to come? Because that's what you know. I think mentoring, coaching, supporting, and being there for a child, we see it over and over again in the child welfare system. That is, those connections, those lifelong connections that children establish, enable them to be resilient, to come back and surmount what they've experienced in their life. Are they going to struggle? Yeah, probably so. Many of us struggle about a variety of things. But we've got someone who provides that sounding board, that support. And I think in the child welfare system in particular, that's the most significant change that speaks to solutions now, is how do we partner? How do we come together? How do we build bridges with education to change the fact that fewer children in foster care graduate and continue on into post-secondary education, that they stay out of the criminal justice system, that they have a voice. What is it that you need from the system? We've been including those youth in that process. The child welfare system has what's called whole family foster care, and it provides a mentoring opportunity for a foster family to care for a teen parent that then, okay, we need to do some planning here. While you're in care, what is it that once you get out we'll need to plan for? Do we need to save for a crib? What kinds of things are you going to need when you are no longer part of the child welfare service system? Because they don't want their kids in the system. They've experienced it. So they don't want their children to grow up and experience some of those challenges that they've had. So I think keeping in mind, how do we strengthen families? How do we provide them an opportunity and give them the hope and a sense that someone, and it could be anybody, that hour of time believes in them and enables them to have a sense of a future? I think that's going to be an important role for all of us in the community.
So growing up, my mom was always the smiley mom because she didn't speak the language. So parent conferences, everything like that, she would sit across the table from the teachers and smile. And I remember being second, third grade, hardly knowing any English, but translating because I was the only person that knew how to say hi and hello. But hope and literacy, two very, very, very powerful tool for sure. Because as we learned to read, we taught my mom how to read. And as she learned to read, I realized that my younger siblings also learned how to read, and she taught them the most basic. But it really instilled in her hope. And I remember growing up, she would tell us, go to school, you don't speak the language, but you know what, just stumble forward, stay confused, you'll be all right. And growing up, I'm thinking, okay, stumble forward, stay confused, all right, we'll see where this goes, right? But literacy is so important. And around this community, there's some very simple things that some organizations are already doing, some businesses, and I applaud those businesses that come together with us every year to make this happen. So, as those of you that are parents and have young children, I'm sure you probably have bookcases, boxes of books that you probably don't need anymore. And you're probably wondering, what am I going to do with this? I'm out of garage space. Well, we do have a little tiny program called the United Way Book Bank. And we ask families, we ask businesses, we ask companies, organizations, whoever that wants to just clean out your kids' books and bring it by the United Way Book Bank. Because what we do with these books is we give hope back to children. We take the books, we clean them up. We have volunteers that come in. Not enough volunteers though, but we do have some volunteers that come in. And they'll duct tape the book, they'll tape the book, whatever they have to do to get this book functional. And we get it back out to the kids. Title I schools, preschool, program, churches, whoever needs a book, we never say no to anyone. As long as we have them, they go out. And literacy, really does instill hope in families. I've seen it happen. I've seen it change hundreds of families in my community, and I've seen it change hundreds of families in my children's schools. So it's just a really easy things when we look around. What can we do, and who's already doing it? And I know that many of us have participated in many different kind of activities, but a simple book, that's something that we can all do.
Thank you, Mae. Thank you all. Mine's on. So one of the things that a few of our speakers spoke about or alluded to was this concept of partnerships. So the Junior League of Fresno is a mighty force of women, hundreds of women who volunteer their time every week and every day in our community. But we don't really do anything by ourselves. We see partnerships and initiatives that we can either come to the side and support, or that we can kind of grow from the ground and pass off to someone else to take on. That's kind of been our model. So we've always kind of been about a community partnership model. So I want to talk with our panelists a little bit about, and Kendra, you kind of touched on this already with the Teen Pregnancy Alliance, but are there other alliances that specifically address the issues or the programs that we're talking about that are kind of either coming up or have been existing that really can represent a cross sector of the community coming together on the issue?
I think one of them is the children's movement, and some of you may have heard about it, and so it was kind of born out of First Five, and really based on this recognition that First Five couldn't be on its own, the only one kind of out there in terms of, especially from a policy standpoint, but that we really shouldn't be, even if we could have been at the time when I was there. And so it was really about creating a community movement that made children a priority in this community in terms of decision making, both, at an individual level all the way up to our elected officials. And so what they've currently kind of transitioned, they held a summit in 2013 in September, and there was about 450 attendees, and as a community, they had those real-time voting machines, where you go to those and you can see it all come up and everyone votes. And they selected third grade level reading as the area where we kind of wanted to start to get the practice of how to do this kind of collective work. It's easy in theory, but then when you sit down with organization, you're trying to all kind of mesh and align and mold and shape each other into this common agenda. So they have action forums that meet about every 6 weeks, and the great thing about it is it's completely community-led. Each person that's there, you're not going to get assigned a task. So if you go, the question is, what is your sphere of influence? How can you be part of this work? How could you take this information or message to your church or your organization, or what can your business do? Do you have service clubs you're involved in? So everyone's coming. There's breakouts from prenatal care all the way up to the actual reading programs in 2nd and 3rd grade. And so it's really about us trying to come alongside the schools, recognizing that they can't do it alone. And so we as a community need to take responsibility. So the children's movements, it's tcmfresno.org. You can become a member as an individual. It's free, and it's really about just saying that you believe kids should be a priority in this community. And then it provides kind of a space for this collective work to really take place.
Another thing I'd recommend is don't start a new nonprofit. Okay? Find one that's doing what you are passionate about and get behind them. My wife had Read Fresno. She was the executive director for a while. But we came to find out that Reading and Beyond was doing very similar work. So a $300,000 grant that DOT got for Read Fresno, we transferred to Reading and Beyond. You see, you get more bang for your buck when you have fewer folks who are the focus, but gaining more volunteers to work with them. Because we have some people with really good ideas, and they're duplicating ideas that are already out there. And so it diminishes the finances that are available through grants when you're competing for the same thing. So if you can find a way, and the children's movement is one of the best examples of that. But the Fresno Regional Foundation is supporting a whole lot of things. Irvine Foundation is supporting. The California Endowment. There are a lot of places to get money. But let me tell you what I think you should be doing. You should be volunteering on the boards of these organizations so that you're helping them thrive and stay alive. Because there's some really dedicated CEOs that are working like crazy to keep the thing going, and they're doing some great work, but they are exhausted. And they need really competent people like yourselves who say, I'll step up and I'll be on a nonprofit board and I'll help raise money. I'll help tell my friends about it so that they can support as well. I'll go, and if you don't want to do that, join United Way. United Way, I'm the chairman of the United Way Fund this year. And yeah, I've had to do that, you know. They will go to all of the nonprofits and help. Kathy, wave your hand. Here's an Olympic champion who is working with Girl Scouts and doing some amazing work to help girls understand the success that they can be and the decision making that is good, those kinds of things. We have a lot of great people in the community doing really good things. Get behind those that are already doing it, and I'll tell you, your life will be easier if you do that, because startups are hard. They are really hard, because as soon as you go, they say, oh, I'm already supporting this one and this one and this one and this one. Family Healing Center with Margie Jessen is doing some amazing work working with our law enforcement. In fact, taking a child that has been abused, putting them in a room with a really competent interviewer and filming it, and then the questions are coming through the headset to all of the law enforcement behind a window that the child can't see. So they're giving the child an environment that is a lot better for the child to be able to answer and to heal and have those kinds of things happening. They need help. They need volunteers. There's no end to the number of places that you can go to volunteer. Find a way to do that. You will have accomplished something you'll be so proud of, and I'll guarantee you this, you won't want to stop. The hardest part will be leaving.
Yeah, and if I could just reiterate, spending the last 15 years as a funder of organizations, I cannot underscore this enough. You know, we would have organizations come to us and they'd say, you know, if you would just fund a grant writer, you know, we'd be okay. And we knew as their funder, that was the least of their problems. We're like, you know, you can't keep board members, or in some case, you know, they had a strong executive director that was, you know, really, they said, struggling carrying the organization on their back. Other cases we've had, you know, where you've got an executive director that picked a board that was maybe all their friends, and so it's running amok. But I mean, the number one call I'll get from people from organizations is, I need board members. And when I ask, it's typically not that they need somebody with the expertise. They're like, I need attorneys, I need people that can do events, I need fundraisers, I need finance people. So if you know, that is such a critical role. And if you can invest your time in strengthening these organizations, that is far better than any check you could probably write, you know, to them long term, because it's part of the overall work and sustainability. So great point.
I think it's important that you also have an awareness of where does this money come from, and have an eye or a thought to, how can I leverage this? How can I build on this success and support things, like you said, that are in existence, not create you know, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, as they say. Looking at what does the county spend? How do they spend it? Where can volunteers assist in that process? Looking at what I like to call learning collaboratives. How do you establish a collective vision that moves in a direction that comes from that consensus? It's bringing different folks together. I know I sit on an oversight committee for foster care services, and you look around the table and we have doctors, we have attorneys, we have teachers, we have legislative individuals on that committee, and they all bring in different perspective, so that don't ever sell your perspective short and what you can bring and provide. Another element where we have just started tapping into is the faith-based community. And how do we engage communities of faith to support improved services for children and families in the community? And they're a very generous, open-hearted, open-armed group of folks willing and almost always they say to me, Barbara, just tell me what you want us to do. How can we help? Tell us what you need. And that's just wonderful. So I get to go into their communities and say, oh, now that you've asked, can I talk to you? Can I take 10 minutes out of your sermon on Sunday? Can I talk to your families about becoming foster parents? Can I talk to them about providing that relationship in the life of a child who at that point in time is not connected to a family? So in many instances, there are lots and lots of activities, groups, and with the potential to take anything that you're willing to offer and then parlay that into something greater.
Thank you. So this all kind of seems like it's coming down to the right spot, because what the panelists have all said really is about what is happening in the community, but it really closely aligns with the mission of the Junior League, which is really a threefold mission of promoting volunteerism. That's what we do. Developing the potential of women, train volunteers out in your community doing good things, and actually improving the community. So all of this, I think, is coming to a really great spot. One of the things I wanted to point out is that we also have a public policy agenda. So we're very interested in local, statewide, and national policy and how we can potentially influence that policy to start moving the needle on some of these issues. Anyone want to jump in?
Well,
right, straight from
I have a little to do
Sacramento.
with policy. Yeah, there's a lot going on out there. It's interesting, leaving a local system and going to the state system, albeit, you know, in the criminal justice piece of it. I am struck by the amount of agendas that are out there. You know, I travel, as I said, with the governor here and there, and I'll be part of his criminal justice meeting. He'll leave the room with me, go 2 blocks down to the education meeting, make a left turn at the corner, go into an energy meeting, head back this way and go into a water resource meeting. It's remarkable the amount of public policy agendas that are out there in this state. And I'm here to tell you, we're like Jerry Brown or don't, and let me tell you, everybody feels free to tell me when they don't. But like him or don't, he's brilliant, and he's well informed, and he's got nothing to prove at 76 years old. And so he's really actually sort of moving an agenda that's pretty good for the state of California. We just got a whole new freshman class of legislators. It is a very short legislative cycle with some of these people, and so the agendas have to strike quick and feverish. Many people will tell you it is that very short cycle that creates all these sort of unwanted laws that roll out session after session after session. We get some policy that isn't necessarily the best. I watched the governor last year. I think he was reviewing about 4,700 proposed pieces of legislation coming in, and you know, while you know he can't veto them all, but there's a whole lot of policy out there. Why do I tell you that? Is that all those people have constituents here in Fresno, and if you have an agenda and you want to make impacts, you cannot be afraid to approach, talk, and move it. I can tell you that the associations out there are doing it. The sheriffs are looking at laws that they think need to be done. The district attorneys are looking at laws that they need done. Child welfare does the same thing. It happens cyclically every year. You are the people of the state of California. If you have a piece of legislation or a policy that you want to forward, I encourage you to put it together and to get somebody to start thinking about it for you. This is a good way to get the conversation started with your agency. If there's something that really is a burning issue that you all think is something you need to move forward, this isn't the only junior league in California. You have a presence, you have a body, you have numbers, and you're philanthropic. This may be the, I don't know, 4th, 5th, 6th time I've spoken to Junior League over my career here. You furnished our children's room at the probation department while young people who are victims of sexual assaults were waiting to go into court. You assisted us when Marjorie Mason Center was just starting up and being built. I mean, there's agenda after agenda after agenda you fulfilled. So don't be afraid to get in the policy game because you got your feet on the ground.
Let me share something else that's really simple. Vote.
Yeah.
I'm the political analyst for 47 and 24. So I give them the insight on what's happening in an election. In the primary in June, 18% voted. That meant that 9% plus one person elected somebody to office. You get what you deserve when you don't vote. And so if we want to have a democracy, democracy requires 50% or more, in my opinion. So number one, it's real simple, vote. Number two, don't fail to talk to legislators, policymakers, and those kind of folks, because here's what they do. For example, if I'm an assemblyman, you may send me one email, one letter, one Facebook, whatever way you decide to contact me. I count it as maybe 8,000 votes of people thinking the same way. You see, it gets expanded like crazy. But you know what we tend to do? We tend to say, they probably know how I feel, or, I don't want to bother them, Yeah, one person won't make a difference. Let me tell you what, you make a huge difference. The other thing I would encourage you to do is get elected to every board and committee that you possibly can, school boards, those kinds of things, because the more competent, caring people you have in those roles, the better off the kids are. It's real simple. The kids are so much better off. And you know the old saying, how can you tell when a politician's lying? His lips are moving. Okay, that's where we are right now. We have to get in and put the appropriate pressure on to say, we can do better, you can do better. And you have to make sure that you give your voice to what's going on, but it starts with voting. Because I'll tell you right now, in Sacramento, when they look at Fresno and they see an 18% turnout, they don't care what all of us advocates are saying, because they know they're not going to have enough votes here to make any difference in one way or the other. Not one bit of difference. If we had 80% of the people voting in Fresno, you know what? We'd get a lot more things happening in Fresno from the state in Sacramento.
Awesome. And I would add on to that a couple things. One is that we cannot serve our way out of poverty. We can't serve our way out of the issues. And what I mean by that is services. And while they're needed, I recognize towards the end of my tenure at First Five that $160 million, and 10 years later, our issues were worse than they were when we started. Only those children that were in those services while they were operating were impacted, and we were still we were worse off than when the money started only going to services. And that's when we really shifted gears and said, this is about policy. If we don't get to these policy issues, we can't sustain, this decreasing funding with its increasing need. And so, I think that is absolutely critical. Two is, as he said, get involved. I know people hate politics. Everyone in my circle, like, I hate politics. I'm like, but do you care about kids? Do you care about health, education? Well, sure. I'm like, then you care about politics. Because my boss always says that the best philanthropy is good public policy. And so when we think about that, and in fact, he's taken a little bit of heat lately for the fact that he's increased his investments in candidates. And it's because he realized, look, everybody comes to Granville and wants a check for their services, for their event, for the, this field trip for kids and all of that. And he said, that's great, I don't mind that. But when he understood that the root issue and why those needs were there was because of our poor policies, he said, I have a better chance of shifting things for our kids and our women in our communities if I get the right people in office. And so that's what that is about, is us all paying attention because it's all local. And the last thing I'll say is sometimes policy is hard for people to wrap their heads around. Like, what do you mean by policy? We often think it means, you're going up to the Capitol or you're working on a ballot measure or a candidate. But one example of policy when I was at First Five was breastfeeding. So he said, we looked at it and the data showed that the decision for most women was made at the hospital. So they might have gone in with, yes, I'm going to breastfeed, and then whatever that hospital's practices were, that influenced in a lot of cases whether or not those women were breastfeeding upon leaving. So we went to the hospitals because they were all giving out the free formula bags because the formula companies provide that, and you get your thing of free formula and all your coupons. And so we realized, okay, they're getting this mixed message of breastfeeding is what's best and healthy for baby in our community, but here's all your free formula, in exchange. So we met with the hospitals and said, what will it take for you to change your policy? And so they said, we've been wanting to do this, but we don't have anything to put in its place. And we don't have the funding for it because, quite honestly, the formula bags are free. That's why we give them out. So we said, okay, let's provide you with something in its place. So if you have had a baby in the last probably 4 to 5 years in Fresno County, you probably received a diaper bag from First 5 that was full of breastfeeding information. And so that was policy change. So we have every birthing hospital now has come on board. They are no longer giving out formula bags. They are giving out the breastfeeding support bags. And we had a huge policy win. So, when you think about that, don't think it just has to be these big measures or things. Policies could be school level policies. They could be within, neighborhoods or even your own, business or organization. So think macro, but also think micro when you're thinking policy.
And I have to agree with everything they've said. The most powerful thing in public policy and advocacy is all of you. So vote, get out there, make your voices heard. Whatever you're passionate about, speak it up.
Great. So before we open up to questions from the audience, I just want to kind of loop back here. And so thinking about what the Junior League of Fresno, given our mission, given our focus, can do. We've had some great recommendations, and especially around volunteering our time and getting involved in policy. So how do you see that the Junior League of Fresno can make a difference on some of these issues? What can we do as a collective group?
I would say just raising the profile of a lot of these issues. I mean, I'm looking around the room and I don't know probably 90% of you, which is awesome, because typically I'm in a room where I'm speaking to the choir, which is great, and we love it, but it's like we keep saying we need to get outside our circles. We all kind of in our world get it, but it's, we've been talking about how do we tap into the other sectors? How do we reach those people in this community that we know they care, but they're in industries or working in companies that this information doesn't really touch them in any way. So I think given that you have a very, diverse demographic, you really do have a strong reputation in terms of people know the name Junior League, and so that brings with it a lot of the respect. I think that you just holding this tonight is huge, and to continue to kind of really raise the profile of these issues and create a space to have the dialogue is really critical.
Let me make a simple recommendation. 1 goal is a goal, 2 goals is half a goal, 3 goals is no goal. Focus. Get together, decide on an area that you wish to support, whether it's literacy or getting more fathers involved, because you have a lot of influence in that arena, by the way, folks. Whatever it is, focus, narrow what you're going to do, because you'll have a much greater impact if you narrow it than if you try to shotgun it and hit everything. We'll be 100 years from now and they'll say, why did they do that? If you shotgun it. If you focus, you'll have a lot of people saying, wow, that was a turning point.
And whether it's books, whether it's volunteering with a nonprofit, one thing that I just like to add to that is get our young people involved. If you have young children, get them involved. I have a 12-year-old and I include her in every voluntary event that I do. Get them involved, because the best thing about it is when she talks to her 12-year-old friend, it confuses them. Confuses generation. I love it. Get them involved. Get them doing things that their friends are not doing, and you'll change the next generation.
I was having a lot of thoughts while we were, talking about what actually can Junior League do. I mean, where do you want to hit your high point? Is there a community center you want to go involve yourself in and do parenting classes and education classes and do something like that? I don't know. I can tell you that we can't decide that it has to always be about money. We're from a very impoverished community. With that said, I don't think we're going to be able to turn the economics around right now. But where can you put your woman power / manpower and make a difference, even if it's with one small spot in Fresno where you can make an inroad? We ran a program in probation on the junior high campuses, and it was for kids that were at risk, not at risk of criminal involvement, although we know when you're at risk you often end up there, but we defined those kids at risk by seeing a 1-point GPA drop in a specific semester in 7th grade. And what we did was we made a hub at the junior highs, and they could come in, and as their grades went up, we'd be there to do homework. These were probation staff. We had a grant to do it. And we had pizza parties when they did well. We invited their parents to celebrate their good grades, blah, 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 blah. It was extraordinary. It resulted in maybe 2 arrests out of the 300 kids we served at those junior high sites. It made a huge difference because at a time when it was pivotal, whether they were going to succeed or fail, there was an intervention that recognized there were some invisible kids out there that were sliding off the radar. Now, I'm not recommending that you do that, but I'm recommending that you find a place where you can insert yourself, and you won't make your different overnight, but you'll make your different long range. And it could be literacy. It could just be capturing those invisible kids in a school that are sliding off the radar. It doesn't mean they're going to go out and do an armed robbery tomorrow. It means that they're starting to fail and fall behind. And if you catch them at the right time, you give them a little success, you tell them, you teach them if you work hard, you can make it happen. It changes lives. I know that program changed lives.
Social media too, I'd really recommend that whatever issues you decide to take up, that you get a statement on social media that is brief and to the point, and then send it to all your members, and then have them share it with all of their Facebook friends and that kind of thing. I ran my political campaign that way and got to 50,000 people with the single message that I wanted them to vote for me. Okay, and that works. It really does work. So I would really recommend that you focus your message on whatever media, social media, you decide to use, and then send it out and have it resent and shared. And what I often did was I would have them put the names of the folks that they were sending it to. So you leave the message blank and then let your people fill in to their specific folks, dear friends or colleagues or whatever you want to do, fellow bankers, it doesn't matter what it is. But it's coming from you personally then, instead of just Junior League, but at the bottom and you put member of Junior League. That kind of thing. I think it'd be very powerful. And you have to be like the drip of water. It never stops. It keeps coming. It keeps coming. Because how many of you are on Facebook every day? Raise your hand for just a minute. Hey, how many of you are on 24/7? Raise your hand. Okay. Yeah.
None of these people are my friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can put jail time. That's her Facebook account.
30 new friends. Well, thank you to the panel. We're not quite done yet. I want to open it up. If any of you have questions, I'm going to bring the mic to you.
We actually have a mic stand.
Oh, there is a mic stand. Oh, look.
We need a mic.
But I need to give you my mic, huh, Dylan? There you go, sir.
And kudos to the CART students who are doing all the videoing and hand it to her, yeah.
She wants the whole stand.
You want to see me walk? So you talk a lot about the invisible, the kids that are sort of invisible and slipping through the crack. Are there projects or programs in place or ideas that people have to actually get to them? Because if we're not picking them up until they're already in the system, that seems like a really fantastic area that really could make a difference long term. And how do we reach the invisible kids?
I think that's a great question, and I know at least through the work of the children's movement, what we've been actively trying to do is identify what I call kind of the sensors in the community, right? The sensor's gone off that something's not right with a child or family. And so that could be at the hospital. We know those babies that are leaving, whether they had an initial kind of CPS hold that then got released, so they got to go home, but the hospital knows that there's a concern there. Okay, that's a sensor going on. There's something, so going as far upstream as we can so that those kids, were catching them earlier and earlier. The kindergarten readiness measure that I mentioned earlier, for example, that's now, we know when those kids come in, if they are in immediate follow-up needed, that's our warning point. That's that's an earlier warning point that we have prior to it was third grade level reading. It was like they knew then. Now we have an earlier warning. So we're really trying in this system to say, how do we make sure, partnering with our physicians, they're seeing these kids. So those kids that are showing developmental delays, how do we get that early on, and then have the system set up so it can respond to those sensors. I'm going to be speaking in a couple weeks with the DAs. And, with our new DA, Alexis Smith had invited me, and she said, I want them to understand the power they have in terms of the access they know. We're not asking DAs to all of a sudden kind of become service providers, although they are a bit of a social worker in themselves in some respects, but we're saying you're a sensor. If you're working on a case and you know that there's young children involved in some way, or children that their father's about to go to prison, you can just set off the warning, and let the rest of the system then that does work on that come in and kind of scoop those kids and that family up and support them. So I think we're all trying as part of this collective work to get a little bit better about identifying where the key sensors are and making sure that when it goes off, there's the support system in place to then scoop that family up, so that ideally over time we're seeing fewer and fewer invisible kids downstream.
Plus, so many people do not know what social service agencies, nonprofits, and things are out there. If they did, they would refer. And I got on the internet today before coming to the meeting, just put in Fresno nonprofits. Over 500 came up. Well, the way it was set up on the internet, I had to go into each one to find out what they did. Well, you're not going to do that. So one thing that you guys could do is work with United Way or those kinds of agencies who know what the nonprofits are doing in the area of women and children, and post those on your website. That would be a quick reference when something is needed. Boom, this group provides this kind of service, and that would make a huge difference.
Thank you. You guys were great today. You had talked a lot about literacy early in our conversation here, and there's third grade reading level is an important milestone for kids. Hopefully we catch those kids in fourth grade and can correct that problem. I don't know why that's not happening. I'm interested to know that I know the schools test them every year, and so I'm assuming the schools know that these children are behind in literacy, and what are the process? What is the process to help them get to appropriate reading level? And how long does it take to get children who are behind? I'm sure if they're still reading, first or second grade when they're in 12th grade, if they even make it that far, it's going to maybe take longer. Or is it faster to learn when you're more mature like that?
It's really quite simple. You need as much of a one-on-one relationship as you can possibly get. And even for adults who don't read, if they can be read to, that helps them develop their literacy. So it's really critical that you get as much reading to them, then have them read at an appropriate level. What we've tended to do is really a mistake. We've given them a grade appropriate age-wise and said you should be reading here. No, they should be reading where they're reading and then develop from there. So we frustrate them so much they no longer want to do it. So they give up on reading. Plus, you got to remember, a lot of kids are real good at faking it. They will absolutely confuse you to no end on what they really know and don't know. Have you been to DMV? You ever see the person behind you who's studying the E? They're doing that. And then when they take their glasses off, I hope it was right. They're going all over the place. Yeah, because they couldn't see a thing, and that's the same thing with kids. So, plus you got all the dysfunctional factors that the family has. And so as you get older, embarrassment becomes a big part of it. I'm not going to tell anybody I can't read. I'm pulled away to do work. I'm pulled away to take care of a sick parent. All kinds of things start happening. I'm pulled away to a gang. All of those issues start. So if you're not reading on grade level by the third grade, it's going to take you 6 years on average to get caught up. 6 years on average to get caught up.
And to add on what he was saying, what we're seeing through this children's movement work, because we're really cutting down to the data and getting to where we're asking the right questions, going full circle to where we started with saying we need to get to ask the good questions, is looking at the kids that aren't on grade level. A lot of them chronically absent. So we're going, why aren't they in school? You know, and we're hearing from the superintendents, we've got asthma issues, we have kids that can't see. So they said, it's great you're getting them here, but I got kids that can't see and can't breathe. So, you know, when we need to look at beyond just the intervention at the school level, which is absolutely critical, getting them with a reader, but really drilling down and saying, what are those other familial or community factors that are coming into play that have nothing to do, you know, with a literacy intervention program? And I think that's the important part, and what the community is really trying to do to come alongside these schools.
Here's one other quick joke, okay, but it'll demonstrate it.
Go for it.
It'll demonstrate it. Two kids were taking a test one day, and on question number 7, one of them put, "I don't know," and the kid next to him put, "Me either." Okay? That's what's happening in a lot of our schools. You know, we look at just enough to get an answer to get by, so I don't get asked a question to find out if I really know. And it's happening on a regular basis because kids are good at disguising.
And they grow into adults who end up in our system that are in custody now. We're running a lot of education programs across the state where we have pods full of men who are trying to get their GED, and women also, that are trying to get their GED, that are a captive audience. They have very good attendance. And we're making you know, great strides with that. And then we get them out of custody and we figure out quickly that they don't have the soft skills it takes to get the job. And what I mean by soft skills is that little motivation you have in the morning when the alarm goes off and you really want to go like this, but you stop yourself and you get up and you get yourself together and you get on down the road. And so we work really hard with that in terms of day reporting programs that we can get people into so they can develop those. It's very difficult late in life. So we know that truancy, and I sit on a blue ribbon commission with the Judicial Council on truancy, we know that school discipline are great impactors to kids' issues in terms of succeeding in school. Once you label a kid a discipline problem, and you know they're expelled or suspended, you know their psyche starts being very comfortable with the failure cycle. And so we have to be very judicious about that. When I was running juvenile hall, we moved the bar up. We quit detaining kids for offenses that we knew were taking them down a different road. And what we've seen since we've started doing some of these prevention interventions in juvenile justice is over the last 12 years, and you wouldn't know this by reading the news, because remember, at all times, if it bleeds, it leads. But juvenile crime has gone down year over year over year to an all-time low right now in California. I think that has to do with appropriately funding prevention, intervention, and other approaches to kids that get in trouble, you know, instead of just hitting them with a large stick. So there's lots of ways to approach these issues. I'm a big fan of prevention and intervention.
So with that, I want to thank our panelists for joining us tonight. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. This was a wonderful conversation, and it's obviously just the start of a conversation, which I think is the best news, is that we can continue this conversation. I also want to say thank you to the CART students who are hiding back there and around the corner, who have been doing our videography. And thank you to CART and the CART CEO, Rick Watson, for hosting us tonight. We love being here. Thank you. Thank you to all the community members who joined us tonight, and I hope that you are even more interested about the work that we're doing now and joining us in this work. I also want to thank the membership for pulling this together in your busy schedules and really making this happen. This is a huge point for the Junior League of Fresno. Thank you. And finally, as we take all this information and we kind of start processing it as a league, we will be sharing it back out through social media. We love Facebook. We love Instagram too. Follow us on Instagram, and we'll share it back out. And we really, there's each of you will have the chance to fill out a survey and indicate where you think that we should be focusing to make the biggest community impact. We really do want to hear from you, both our membership and the community members and even our panel. We want more information. So if you don't have a survey, please see one of us with a red name tag and we'll make sure that you get one. And in the meantime, follow us on Facebook. Watch out for the great work that we're doing, and we look forward to working with you and partnering with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Let me close with one last thing real quick. You've heard the old saying that you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, but you can salt the oats and make it more likely that they'll drink. That's what you're going to do.
Thank you all.